Monday morning, you wake up before your alarm, and for once, you don't hit snooze. You get out of the bed, go for a run, and somehow, you don't even have to force yourself. You come home, throw out the junky food, clean up your room, maybe even make a plan for the next few weeks. And something feels different. For the first time in months, you feel like you finally become the person you've been trying to be. The disciplined version of you, the focused version, the version that actually has it together. And for the next 3 days, you are unstoppable. But then day 4 comes. Maybe you're sleeping, you tell yourself you work out later. Later becomes tomorrow. And suddenly, the motivation felt almost endlessly a few days ago is nowhere to be found. You start wondering, what happened to me? Why did I lose my discipline? Why can't I ever stick with anything? But here's the thing, maybe you didn't lose your discipline, maybe you spent it, and you didn't even realize you are taking out the loan. To understand what happened, you have to go back almost a century. In the 1930s, a psychologist, Clark, noticed something interesting while studying animals running through mazes. The closer they get to the lure, the faster they moved. They didn't just move toward the goal, they accelerated as the goal got closer. Decades later, researchers Lan Kiverts, Oleg Ormsky, Yuan Zengi found something remarkably similar in people. They studied customer loyalty programs and discovered that as people felt closer to reward, they increased their effort. The phenomenon became known as the goal gradient effect and helps explain something strange about the beginning of a new habit. When you start something new, you are not just experiencing effort, you are experiencing proximity. You are imagining the person you're about to become. You're picturing the body you will have, the discipline you will develop, the life you will finally get under control. And because you can see the future version of yourself so clearly, your brain almost reaches the finish line as if it's already nearby. You are not thinking about 90 workouts ahead of you. You are thinking about the person you'll be after those 90 workouts. And that feeling can be incredibly powerful. That's why day 1 doesn't always feel difficult. Sometimes it feels amazing. You are not building the habit yet. You're riding the emotional high of imagining that you've already changed. And then, reality catches up. Because the finish line doesn't arrive as quickly as your brain expected. And this is where the second part of the story begins. In 2002, psychologists Janet Polivy and C. Peter Herman described a pattern they called false hope syndrome. The cycle is surprisingly familiar. You set an ambitious goal, you become intensely optimistic, you feel like this time will be different, you expect dramatic progress, then reality gets in the way. You miss a workout, you eat something you promised yourself you wouldn't, you sleep late, you have a bad day, and instead of seeing that as normal part of changing as long as standing habit, you see it as evidence that you failed, so you quit. And eventually you start over. New Monday, new plan, new burst of motivation, new promise that this time will be different, and the cycle begins again. That strange part, the surge and collapse aren't really two separate events. They are part of the same loop. The bigger the promise you make to yourself on day 1, the more painful it can feel when day 5 doesn't match it. But there is another piece to this. And this one might explain why the motivation is fake can actually make quitting easier. It is called moral licensing. The basic idea is simple. When we feel we moved down something good, we can sometimes give ourselves permission to do something we wouldn't normally allow. You eat healthy lunch and suddenly the set feels deserved. You go to the gym and skipping tomorrow doesn't seem so bad. You spend 3 days being incredibly disciplined and your brain starts thinking, I've been good, I've earned a break, and that's where the trap gets interesting because motivation starts to feel like currency. You put in 3 incredibly productive days and somewhere in your mind you've made the deposit, you've earned the credit. So when the day 4 arrives and you don't feel like doing the work, taking a day off doesn't feel like a failure, it feels deserved. And that's what we might call the discipline depth effect. The stronger the emotional high at the beginning, the easier it can become a mistake that feeling for actual progress. You feel motivated, so you assume you're disciplined. You feel committed, so you assume you've changed. You feel unstoppable, so you assume you always feel this way. But feelings aren't commitment, and motivation isn't a contract. The first burst of energy can be it can be powerful, but it doesn't guarantee what happens next. And maybe that's why we keep getting fooled by the same Monday morning. Every time we feel like the surge, we think, this time I finally figured it out. But maybe the real test was never Monday, it was Thursday or Friday. The morning when the excitement is gone, the morning when your bed feels warmer, when the gym feels harder, when the goal doesn't feel closer anymore. That's the moment that tells you whether the change was Lee. Because discipline isn't what you do when you're excited, it's what you do when the excitement disappears. And nobody avoids that moment forever. Eventually, every new habit reaches the boring part, the part where there is no rush, no transformation montage, no feel that you're becoming a completely different person, just another ordinary morning and another decision. Do it anyway. That's why the people who actually change aren't necessarily the ones who feel the most motivated on day one. Sometimes they are the ones who feel almost nothing. They don't need Monday to feel magical. They don't need to feel unstoppable. They don't make huge promise that they are going to become a completely different person overnight. They simply decide what happens when motivation runs out. They expect the third morning, they expect the bad mood, they expect the excuse, and they make decisions before the version of themselves arrives. So think back to the version of you who was in 3 days in new beginning, exhausted but proud. You genuinely believe this time was different, and maybe that feeling wasn't fake. Maybe it was Lee, but it wasn't proof that you changed. It was only the beginning, a down payment, and eventually the bill comes due. The question isn't whether you lose the motivation, you will. The question is what you decide to do when you do. Because the version of who you feel is unstoppable on Monday isn't one who determines whether the habits survive. It's the version of you who wakes up on Friday, doesn't feel like doing anything, and doesn't anyway. So the next time that surge comes, enjoy it, use it, but don't trust it. Don't confuse feeling motivated with being committed. And before you start celebrating the person you're about to become, ask yourself one question. What am I going to do when I don't feel like being that person anymore? Because that's where the real transformation begins. Not on the day you feel unstoppable, but on the day you don't.